From WKGC Public Media, this is ReelTalk, the place where you can join the cinematic conversations frame by frame each week. I'm your host, R.L. Terry. If movies are your thing, you're in the right place for today's deep dive into the history, present state, and future of the Oscars, which was founded in 1929 and has recently made waves with its announcement that it's moving the broadcast of the ceremony to YouTube in 2029. For nearly a century, the Academy Awards have functioned as Hollywood's grand mirror, reflecting not only what the industry celebrates, but what it values, what it fears, and what it is willing to forget. At their best, the Oscars can spotlight artistry, elevate careers, and preserve a cinematic legacy. At their worst, they become a symptom of a larger cultural drift away from craft, complexity, and adult storytelling, and toward invisibility, virality, and brand alignment. In my recent article on the Oscars, I argue that the Oscars have not simply lost relevance, as the popular refrain goes, but that they have been reshaped by the same forces transforming film culture itself. Social media, amplification, algorithmic attention economies, and a growing emphasis on content over cinema. Awards campaigns now unfold less as conversations about artistry and more as extended exercises in optics, momentum, and even narrative control. Following the announced move to YouTube in 2029, I wrote my article because I felt it was the time to reevaluate this celebrated ceremony, and I titled it "The Oscars Are Big." Cinema is big. It's the Oscars that got small. Any Sunset Boulevard fans will get the reference there. But I'm not the only one that has published on the Oscars, and we'll be getting to my guest here in just a moment. I'm incredibly excited to dive deep into this topic. Listeners, in my article, I make the argument that their move to YouTube is not merely a distribution decision, but a symbolic capitulation. An institution founded to celebrate cinema's grandeur and communal ritual, it's now flattened into algorithmic content where immediacy and engagement metrics outweigh reverence and craft and even artistic risk. And that shift raises a fundamental question: why the Oscars still stand what they still stand for, and a culture increasingly willing to trade ceremony and meaning for convenience and reach. Which is bringing me to today's guest. Debbie Pawlak's book, Bringing Up Oscar, The Men and Women Who Founded the Academy, approaches the Academy Awards not as a red carpet spectacle, but as a living room cultural institution, one shaped by history, tradition, contradictions, and change. It's a thoughtful and accessible exploration of the Academy Awards. Emphasis on accessible. I'm telling you, folks, what I really enjoyed about the book is how weighty it is with conversation, with the prompts that you're then going to start sending through your mind and really digesting what you've read, and it's all done through language that's very accessible, but still delivered with incredible gravitas. And so I love the exploration of the Academy Awards. And so together, today, we're not here to scold the Oscars nor romanticize them, but to ask a more productive question: what do they still mean, and what could they mean again? Without any further ado, my guest today is the author of the book, Debbie Pawlak. Welcome to the show, Debbie.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for having me.
So thank you so much for being here. Debbie is a lifelong cinephile and scholar whose professional writing career began in 2000. She has spent over a decade exploring Hollywood history for traditional publication and online outlets. And before we get into our deep dive into the Academy Awards, Debbie, can you describe for our listeners a little more about your book and perhaps even more importantly, what inspired you to write it?
Well, the book is not just about Oscar. The book is about the founding of the Academy, early Hollywood, and the 33 men and 3 women who actually are considered the founders of the institution. And early Hollywood is just filled with colorful characters and crazy events and
Mhm.
never a dull moment. So my interest lied in how did these 36 men and women who were extremely different from each other, how did they end up in the same room at the Ambassador Hotel on January 11th, 1927? We had people with totally different backgrounds. We had people who could hardly read. We had college professor. We had people who had a wealthy background. We had people who were dirt poor. They were very different in what they did before they came to Hollywood, because you have to remember there was no Hollywood in the
Mhm.
teens, and it kind of came into its own in the 20s.
Mhm.
And these people all had different jobs before that. We had bicycle shop owners, we had rag pickers, we had cowboys, we had vaudevillians, we had gold miners. One of them was even kind of considered himself an amateur anesthesiologist. And so they were a really motley crew. So in my mind, I wanted to know how they ended up in this room together in 1927.
Mhm. Yeah, it's the history is so very interesting, and you find angles from which you can approach these individuals, and fun facts, and just all kinds of little pieces here and there that often get lost in broader conversations, and it really brings this world to life. And so I love how it is transportive, but it's also illuminating all at the same time. And it's such a because it's such it's a very large topic, and I like how uh, within that you're able to dive into these different areas, and I love the talking about the people, because it's not just the history of it, a lot about the people that really helped to shape this. So I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your busy schedule to come on to the show today to talk more about it. Because you certainly don't have to twist my arm to talk anything movies or Oscars. But Debbie, the Oscars are often criticized as being, quote, out of touch. Yet they remain one of the last major institutions attempting to canonize film history in real time. Do you see the Academy primarily as a cultural authority, or more as a reflection of the industry's anxieties at any given moment?
Well, looking at a historic perspective, I would have to say it's a blend of both.
Hmm.
Um, the Academy was formed out of desperation. Hollywood was in big trouble back in the 20s for various reasons, and they needed to be able to present a united front, and
Hmm.
everybody was kind of flying by the seat of their pants. Warner Brothers was doing something, MGM was doing something, United Artists was doing something, and they needed to come together and present a united front. They were forward thinkers, these people, obviously, and they were concerned about the future of the industry that they worked so hard to build. So when the Academy was formed, they set up various committees, and the Award of Merit program, which we know as the Oscar today, is just a piece of it. And I
Hmm.
really don't think the founding members ever dreamed they would morph into what they did.
Yeah.
Um, they had a committee to address the technical issues, because they were all facing the coming of sound, which totally revolutionized the business.
Hmm.
And they had a committee for reconciliation to help people who had issues come
Hmm.
together and resolve them without fear of being attacked.
Hmm.
They had an education committee because they were very concerned about future generations of filmmakers. They wanted to pass on their knowledge and make the film world even better. So there were a lot of committees that they formed as a result of the Academy, but we just hear about the Oscars. So I would have to say they're really a blend of both.
Yeah, and as I understand it, and you're much more of an Oscars expert than am I, but as I understand it, another kind of division or purpose that the Academy served was in their effort to ward off the growing influence of labor unions back east, which were encroaching into Hollywood. And this was the Academy also served as a way for them to be a part of a workforce that would provide the different employment protections and regulations and wage deciding upon fair wages and whatnot as sort of a way to kind of thwart that. Again, that's my understanding of it. If one, is that true? And do you have anything you may be able to add to that?
Yeah, one of the founding members was a fellow named Fred Beatson, and his responsibility primarily was censorship.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we had censorship all over the place. Every state had their own censorship board.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the cities had their own censorship board. So,
Mm-hmm.
what might have passed in California did not pass in New York. That sort of thing. And he actually, in addition to censorship, he founded organization for treating animals fairly, so
Mm-hmm.
that the animals would be protected. And he also created the organization that runs today, I believe, for extras,
Mm-hmm.
because back then they would just hang around the studios hoping to get picked for a part.
Yeah.
And he gave them a place to come where they were able to get roles and they didn't just have
Mm-hmm.
to hang around hoping to get a job. And there was some protection involved with them. So yes, definitely they were trying to make things better for people.
Yeah, it is, and there's so much more. The Your book and other research I've done for my own writing and articles has revealed that it is the gold statuette is just really one. I'm not gonna put a percentage with it, but it's just such a small portion of everything that it does and everything that it represents.
Well,
Look.
I was just going to say the funny part is the very first Academy Awards, they were held in 1929 at the Roosevelt Hotel. And just to give you an idea that Oscar really didn't mean a whole lot back then, the first woman to receive the Best Actress Oscar award was Janet Gaynor. And she was very young. And she admitted the award meant absolutely nothing to her. But what really meant something to her was that Douglas Fairbanks handed it to her. So
Mm,
that's what she took away from it. So there was no history, there was no big fanfare, and winners had been announced 3 months prior, so there was no suspense.
mm,
And it was very low key, very low key.
mm. Yeah, it began as a dinner, not unlike kind of the Golden Globes, and then it eventually would morph into what we have today. When we look at today's ceremony, um, do you feel that the Oscar choices feel more reactive, whether nominations or wins, feel more reactive, that is to say, responding to social discourse rather than leading artistic conversations?
It just seems like it's lost its luster.
Yeah.
It's become commercialized,
Mhm.
it's become political. And I don't
Mhm.
think that's ever what the founders
No.
meant to happen.
No, I certainly don't think so, which is in part why. And listeners, regular listeners to my show, or readers on my blog, or other just social following me on social media know that I kind of gave up on it a while ago. I still respect what it stood for, and wish we could get back there, but it seems to have strayed quite far from its original intent. Your book, Debbie, bringing up Oscar frames the Academy Awards is something that has been shaped and reshaped over generations, starting with these first founding members to the point, where we are today. At what point did the Oscars shift from celebrating the craft, which we just mentioned, and the longevity, to emphasizing relevance and optics and immediacy? What do you think about those ideas?
Well, we live in the information age, so they say, and I think they're trying to keep up. You can't stay the same and be
Yeah.
successful. You can't be stagnant. You have to keep up with the times.
Hmm.
But I think it's overkill with, we have 24/7 news information thrown at us all the time.
Yeah.
And I think they're trying to keep up with that and compete with everything else that's out there.
Mm.
And that has really kind of thinned out its meaning, I think.
Mm. Yeah, I guess we could, maybe another way of looking at it, that motion pictures are now framed less as enduring works. And, and listeners, there are exceptions to that. But speaking in broad terms here, films are now framed less as enduring motion pictures and more as cultural events with relatively short shelf lives, because I find I'm talking way more about motion pictures from, say, 25 years ago, 50 years ago, than I am what is much more recent. Do you agree with that? Do you also see that the shelf life is eroding, and they are just more like, it's micro, you're being awarded based upon microwave movies, and then we move on to the next one? I guess you could think of it as craft becoming secondary to visibility.
Yeah, and I think part of the issue is we have so many special effects now, so many. And every time a movie comes out, the next one tries to outdo it.
Mm-hmm.
And we lose story, we lose character. I mean, I can go to the movies and watch an action movie and like it, but
Mm-hmm.
when I come out of the movie, it's like, well, what was it about? Because you were so involved with the explosions and the car chases and all the other things that were going on. You just kind of like, well, okay, but what was it
Yeah.
about? And what was that character's name again?
Mm-hmm.
I really think that's been an issue, that we've lost storytelling, we've lost character development,
Mm-hmm.
and it's sad to see. And if you go back to the movies that were made in the 30s and 40s, they didn't have those special effects. Yes, they
No.
had some, but nothing like we have today.
No.
And the stories were focused on plot, and they were focused on the characters,
Yeah.
good or bad.
Mm-hmm. I feel that the writing is much weaker today than it was back then. That there, we're seeing an increased appearance of writer directors, where it's almost this idea that in order to be a serious filmmaker, in order to be considered an auteur, like, you have to be a writer director. Like, you're not just a writer, you're not just a director. You have to be both, because that's the only way of being a true artist. I think it is an incredible. I think it's an incredibly um, uh, argument that is kind of very destructive in its nature, because I feel it then devalues the work of a screenwriter. It could even devalue the work of a director, because then you're not, again, you're not a true auteur if you're not doing both. And I think one of the problems is because we have so many filmmakers that are insistent upon being writer directors, that they don't stop to think, gosh, my idea may be really good. I may have a fantastic vision for this film, that makes perfect sense in my head, but maybe I'm not the best person to communicate this idea on paper. And you can say the same for writers. Aaron Sorkin's Being the Ricardos a few years ago. He was sitting in the director's chair versus being I would say just, but just being one of the
Right.
greatest screenwriters, and it wasn't directed very well. And so it's like, Sorkin, stick to screenwriting. You're an excellent screenwriter. Stick to that. And so, do you see that influencing to where we're like there's this insistence that you have to be both instead of, hey, maybe a screenwriter is the better person to take my wonderful idea and to be able to craft it, at least on paper anyway, for the screen.
I think it goes back to the old adage, two heads are better than one.
Mm,
Um, Everybody has an expertise. You're not an expert in everything.
mhm,
And I think if you get an expert director together with an expert writer, you get
mhm.
something of value.
Yeah.
But if you're stretching yourself thin to do both, it can work, but it's not the norm.
No, I think in my opinion, it fails more often than it does work. Again, there are exceptions. There are some great writer directors out there. I would say most of them that set out to do it, I say, you know what? I can see where you make a great director, or I can see where you make a great writer, and oftentimes in my reviews, I point that out, and I feel I'm in the minority when I'm speaking with other critics, and it's just like it's okay, there was a great story here somewhere, it just wasn't the one that ended up being on the screen. And so it's an observation that I've made over the years of reviewing films. Well, listeners, you are listening to Real Talk on 90.7 WKGC. I'm your host, R.L. Terry, and today I am joined by Debbie Pawlak, author of the book Bringing Up Oscar, for a discussion on the Academy Awards. But there's still more to come, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to Real Talk on 90.7 WKGC. I'm your host, R.L. Terry, and today I am joined by Debbie Pawlak, author of the book Bringing Up Oscar, for a discussion on the Academy Awards. Debbie, in the article I referenced earlier, I argued that social media has fundamentally altered how films are discussed, valued, and rewarded. How do you see platforms like Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, you can even lump Instagram in there, influencing not just Oscar campaigns, but the kinds of performances and the films that gain traction in the first place?
Well, it's all about buzz.
Mm,
And unfortunately, in our world today, buzz comes from Twitter and TikTok and YouTube and Instagram. So they just jumped on that bandwagon. And I think bottom line is box office. So whatever ways they can advertise their films, that's what they do. And I think it's
mhm,
just overload. I
mm.
really do.
Yeah, the I've never seen. I should say that the campaigns have become much more intense. Like I can remember, we don't even have to go back that far. I can remember even, we'll say, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there kind of were campaigns, but not half as intense as the campaigns now. I mean, in the algorithm on my Instagram, and I'm not typically one drawn to doom scrolling, but even every now and again, the algorithm gets the better of me, and I find myself doing it just like everybody else. And so,
Sure.
in that, like, I'm already seeing what appear to be not campaigns for the Oscars that just came out. I'm talking campaigns already for next year. One of the examples is the Wuthering Heights adaptation, what we'll probably call the loose adaptation of Wuthering Heights, coming out in February. And already I'm seeing what have earmarks of, like, it's already an Oscars campaign, and we're not even to the Oscars for last year, and then just reflecting last year, and it's all over the place. I just don't remember a time, even going back 10 or 15 years, in which the campaigns were this intense. Have you noticed the same thing?
Yeah, and I think what it is the reach of computers and
Mm,
internet. They're trying to take advantage of that. I kind of think in Hollywood, in that close knit community, there might be that kind of hype anyway, but we just as a public never saw it. And
Mm-hmm.
now with all of these avenues open to them, they just run with it and they
Mm-hmm.
try to create this buzz, good or bad, doesn't matter as long as people are
Yeah.
talking about it.
Mhm.
And this is the path they took, is the internet, because that's where they can reach the greatest number of people.
So, do you think we're at the point where films are judged by share ability and not just the substance of the picture itself?
Sometimes it's surprising. Something will come out with some substance.
Mhm.
And I would have to say a good movie will always float to the top because people
Mhm.
will be interested in a good movie. But it's just, they seem to just be churning out these films that
Mhm.
I don't know if they don't put the effort or if it's too costly or what, but they just churn out films that are meaningless.
Mhm.
They don't have it. They just don't have an appeal, at least not for me.
Yeah.
And I think with that buzz they're trying to create all the time, like I say, good or bad, it causes
Mhm.
people to go see it. What's everybody talking about?
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be good.
And I think some of that comes from perhaps FOMO, fear of missing out. So you see other individuals within the discourse online, on social media, and you want to be part of it. And I think from a perhaps from a distribution company perspective, it may not even be the actual filmmaker themselves. Just even from the distribution company, perhaps they do pour more time and energy into movies or greenlight movies that they foresee will generate memes, generate clips that you can easily share, little 10, 15-second clips on Instagram, for example.
Sure.
And so they are trying to manufacture the discourse for the movie, or even manufacture outrage if it's a polarizing movie, which unfortunately so many movies now are. It's like,
Hmm.
gosh, I believe cinema should bring people together. Why are you trying to intentionally piss people off with your movie? But they're trying to manufacture outrage because, as you and I, I'm sure can agree, anger sells. So you're
Yes.
manufacturing this discourse is like, gosh, instead of spending time on developing plots and characters, you're more concerned about generating buzz about your
Yep.
movie. It's like you're starting with, what can I do to generate buzz? What can I do to anger this group? What can I do to be an echo chamber for this group over here? And then you work backwards instead of starting with just a great idea and working forwards.
And bottom line, it's a business like any other
Yeah.
business, and box office is it. How many dollars can we bring in and how can we bring it in?
And I've said this in my classes before. There are twice as many letters in the word business as there are in show.
There
So
you go.
you do you do have that. Debbie, the Oscars once routinely honored mid-budget, adult-oriented dramas, and these are films driven by performance and writing rather than scale. You hinted at this earlier when you talked about all the effects today.
Yep.
Why do you think those films have largely disappeared from the awards conversations? And not just the Oscars. We can apply this to Golden Globes and even Emmys if we want to lump television in there. And more importantly, what does that loss of that mid-budget adult drama say about the industry itself?
Well, I think we've lost the storytelling part of
Mhm.
movies, and that's what made cinema popular. That's
Mhm.
why people went to the theater, other than in the summer when they wanted to be in a cooler place.
Yeah.
They would go to the movies for an escape. They would go to the movies to see another person living another life outside of their own comfort zone.
Yeah.
And it's just gotten kind of lost. I think the storytelling, the character development has just fallen by the wayside, and it's who can outdo the last movie, who can do it better, who can do it bigger, who can do it louder. And
Mhm.
and instead of your adult dramas or comedies
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
we're actually absorbing to watch,
Mhm.
you're getting this shoot 'em up, blow 'em up,
Yeah.
action packed, whatever. And obviously, there's a place for that. People like it. But I think that is causing filmdom to lose its luster. I really do. I mean, how many special effects can you possibly keep coming up with before it
Yeah.
gets kind of boring,
Yeah. It's
But a
true.
good story is a good story.
Yeah, it sure is. I do like that there is a, albeit a mild one, a mild trend back towards less is more, more practical effects. If we were talking horror movies, we'd say more, actual costumes, more, well, real quote fake blood, and you're leaning more into the prosthetics and a lot of the award-winning makeup technology from special effects artists like Tom Savini, Rick Baker. You can even go back further, Jack Pierce. And so I like how there is, particularly in horror, we're starting to see that. But I think it's still very much overshadowed by what you mentioned, Debbie, with the shoot 'em up, blow 'em up, the huge spectacle. It's all about the spectacle, spectacle, spectacle,
Yes,
just like the
yes,
size and scale, which are important. I think cinema should be large in scale, but it's also missing some of that substance. And I can't help but think that these films they're not extinct, but have largely disappeared because they don't have the protection of, say, a franchise, that established fan base, or they don't have something in it that's visible, again getting back to social media, that you could post on social media that's going to create this viral hook. And I think that the algorithms on which these social media platforms are based just are going to reward scale more than substance, because you can't measure substance, you can kind of measure scale. And I think you mentioned business earlier. I feel that studios, distribution companies, production companies perhaps no longer see adult dramas as culturally central or even financially necessary, because there's not going to be as much of a profit that are in those movies, resulting in the Oscars and other award shows reflecting what is produced, not necessarily it's awarding what's being produced versus what the Academy founding mothers and fathers once valued. What are your thoughts along that spectrum?
well, we had among the founders, we had 10 producers, 6 directors, 7 actors, including Mary Pickford, 6 writers, including 2 women, Jeannie McPherson and Bess Meredith.
Hmm.
We had what I called the Guardians, who were Fred Beatson, which I mentioned before, who worked on censorship, and
Hmm.
a couple of lawyers. And then we had the technical team, which was only 3 people. And then there was one lonely exhibitor, which was Sid Groman.
Mm.
And I think that those people originally, they were storytellers. And that's what they did. And we had our technical people. We had a fellow named Robert Ball or Joseph Ball, and he was worked on color film, because
Hmm.
there was no color film back then, and that's what he worked on. He worked for Technicolor.
Hmm.
And the other guy that was on the technical team would have been Roy Pomeroy, and he
Hmm.
was a special effects guy.
Hmm.
And he also was one of the first people to understand how sound impacted the industry. So he was pretty important at the time. But I think somehow over the years, and maybe it has something to do with the way movie telling evolved, People liked the special effects, and so they just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and the
Mhm.
stories kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller.
Mm. Yeah, it's it's almost like it's there. It's hard to. It seems like I'm observing a workforce that is only able to focus on one thing, or maybe it's more accurate to say that they're hyper focused on progress and achieving that they don't stop to think, well, if we achieve that which we deem to be progress, we're not stopping to think about what we may be losing, because we're just it's shiny object syndrome, just
Right,
drawn to that which is shiny. and
right.
and I loved learning that Sid Grauman was among the group, because we all know Grauman's Chinese theater, Grauman's
Right,
Egyptian
right.
theater, and you mentioned storytellers, and
Yes.
his theaters, maybe not the very first Nickelodeons he built, but once we get to things like the Chinese theater and the Egyptian theater, his theaters tell a story. And so he understood the power of storytelling, the power of cinema, and how to reflect that in the exhibition halls themselves, because you were being whisked away to a whimsical world, to a world that's nightmare fuel, or to a romantic world. You are being whisked away to these worlds. And when you were in his two most famous movie palaces, just the passion for storytelling, you could even feel just walking across that now famous forecourt.
Yeah, oh yeah. And he also had a pre-show. So before they showed the movie, there was a live performance. And whatever it was always related back to the movie he was showing. So
Mm,
people came for a live show and then they watched the movie. And he was a really forward thinker. I believe he came up with the red carpet idea, and
mhm.
he came up with the spotlights, for the premieres and things
Yeah,
like that. And of course, he came up with that famous forecourt with the footprints
yeah.
and handprints. Um, he was very well liked in Hollywood, obviously, and yeah, he was one of the founders. And getting back to that technical committee, what I
Mhm,
was trying to point out was that out of all those 36 people, there were only three that were
mhm,
considered technical. And Joseph Ball was with Technicolor, and he was working on the color process for film. Um, the other one was Cedric Gibbons, and he was MGM's set designer.
mhm.
And then we had Roy Pomeroy, who was really special effects. One person out of
Hmm.
all those people.
Yeah. Now I feel if the academy was being founded today, I'd say it's probably the inverse. We'd have three story people,
Yes,
and then we would have 33
technical
technical people,
people.
or
Yeah,
maybe 15 technical, 15 social media. Like
yeah,
that would be your academy. That would be your academy today. Story is certainly feels like it is suffering as these films, are celebrated in the technical. I mean, and I don't mean to suggest that technical categories should not be awarded. I think they should, but I think there's been a shift in values and why they do what they do, and it's that shift is the thing with which I have a problem, or turning the ceremony into, for example, a political bandstand. Like everybody has their convictions. I think
yeah,
everybody should have convictions. If you don't
yeah,
have any convictions at all, it's like you got a problem there. So you should have some
yeah,
kind of convictions. But it's like, when is that more important than the film itself? And it's just like,
yeah.
I
And
thought we were here to celebrate the film, not necessarily what it took to make it, or for what it's doing
I
for.
don't think it was meant as a platform for someone's
Yeah,
personal beliefs. It
yeah,
it 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 was meant to celebrate movies, just like you said.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. One thing that I want to touch on real quickly before we go into our next break is the Academy has made visible efforts toward modernization and inclusivity in recent years, largely in part of some of what you and I just talked about. In your view, Debbie, have these changes strengthened the institution's credibility, or have they complicated its ability to speak with a clear artistic voice?
I think it's been strengthened.
Mhm,
I think that early days, people of color, they were marginalized.
mhm,
They were relegated to servant roles or roles
mhm,
that really didn't have much meat to them. And some of these people were super, super talented. I mean, we have wonderfully funny people, people who were very good with their dramatic skills, but they were never given that opportunity. And as a result, they lost out and we lost out because we didn't
yeah,
get to see them at their best.
mhm,
So I think by being inclusive, I
mhm,
think it's just wonderful. I really do. It's giving people a chance to show what they have, and it's given us a chance to see. So
mhm,
I think that for them to have inclusivity in recent years is fabulous.
mhm. The one of the stories that I think is probably one of the more famous is going all the way back to Gone with the Wind and Hattie
Mm-hmm.
McDaniel, and how the on one hand triumphant moment, but on the other hand it's just like, well, it still wasn't as wonderful as it appeared on the surface because of just how the award was presented, and in interviews
Yes,
thereafter, and
yes,
entering into the theater, having to go through a
yes,
different door,
yes,
and so
yes,
it certainly was not the original incarnation. I know 1939 wasn't the original, but the early incarnation was certainly problematic in that it wasn't this equal playing field for all that were involved. And I feel it's important that if you're an actor, director, writer, special effects technician, whomever you are, that regardless of what you look like, where you come from, that it is an equal playing field for all, because we're should be awarding the work and the artistry that you did. And I like how there has been a lot of progress made towards those that may have been overlooked at one time having that recognition today.
definitely, definitely. And I think that we're the better for it.
Yeah. You are listening to Real Talk on 90.7 WKGC. I'm your host, R.L. Terry, and today I am joined by Debbie Pawlak, author of the book Bringing Up Oscar, for a discussion on the Academy Awards. There's still more to come, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to Real Talk on 90.7 WKGC. I'm your host, R.L. Terry, and today I am joined by Debbie Pawlak, author of the book Bringing Up Oscar, for a discussion on the Academy Awards. So, Debbie, given everything we've discussed so far this hour, the influence of social media, the decline of adult dramas, rich storytelling, shifting industry values, what would a healthier, more meaningful Oscar ceremony look like to you in say the next decade?
Well, I'd like to see them get back to the basics.
Mhm,
Stop being so political.
mhm,
Celebrate movies. Just
yeah,
celebrate movies and the talents and the accomplishments that come out of cinema. Cinema is an art form.
mhm,
Back in the day, it really wasn't considered an art form when it first started up, but
mhm,
it is an art form.
mhm,
And we're kind of, well, the first or second generation that's actually had a chance to sit back and look at ourselves on screen. And I think they just need to get back to basics.
yeah. I think getting back to basics is certainly, I think, not only would work in the Academy Awards, but we can probably apply that approach to a lot of different areas of modern society
I
Get
believe you're
back
right.
get back to the basics. Like you, I hope to see a more meaningful ceremony in the future that gets, again, what we've been saying over this entire hour, uh, the getting back to celebrating the movies, celebrating motion picture arts and sciences. And we have more categories now, and they keep growing. Most recent one is stunt performer, which I think is very fair. And I think it's some very hardworking role on a film that does deserve recognition. But then there's other categories too that almost seem superfluous, and so we're adding categories, some of which maybe they were needed, others of which again seem superfluous. But I feel that we're getting categories that are driven by metrics and optics. And I'd like to see a leaner version of the Oscars in the future, keeping some of what has been introduced over the last 40 years, one of which is Rick Baker's famous award for the very first award for his work on American Werewolf in London. And then we have the a stunt performer, which is new for this year. But I like to see it leaner by and large, and not merely measured by optics or just various metrics, and recentering on the craft of motion pictures, the writing of motion pictures, the performative dimension, and the direction of the picture, emphasizing cinema rather than platforms, and restoring ceremony as ritual, not content. Got enough content out there. We don't need to keep we don't need to
Yes, we do.
keep adding to the content. It's gonna be something to follow. I got a feeling it's just gonna keep growing, and it's not gonna get leaner. And I'm very concerned about what this is going to look like once it is on YouTube, and then no longer has the regulations and guidelines that govern broadcast media. Because once it's online, then all's fair, and so
Yeah,
then
free for all.
it's a
Yep.
free for all. And I just think it's so very dangerous. There are no reins.
No.
There are no standards for decency or content. What's tasteful, what is in poor taste, because it's like the Wild West.
Yeah.
Once it gets on there, and I know they're hoping to get more viewers, but I got to tell you, I think it's a very slippery slope, because right now the only guardrails on that ceremony are the broadcast laws. And so
Right.
you go to that, and then it's just it's completely deregulated. And so and I'm fearful that the socio-political platforms that are so overt in the ceremony even now are just going to be more so once it gets on there. And aside from politics aside, it's getting even further and further away from the original vision of the Academy and of the Oscars. And so I'm very fearful for this move to YouTube in 2029. Have you thought much about what it means for the Oscars moving to YouTube in 2029?
I think they've kind of downgraded themselves
Mm,
and they've kind of sold themselves to media.
mhm,
And you're right. There are guidelines that they would have to adhere to for television broadcast.
mhm,
And again, is it going to be a free for all?
mhm,
We'll have to wait and see. But
mhm.
I think that they're cheapening themselves. Let's put it that way. They're
Yeah.
cheapening themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. That's the first thing I picked up on when I saw that announcement. The very first thing I thought, and in part what inspired me to write my article, because it's just like, this is my lament on the Oscars for what they're doing to themselves. They're caving, in a sense, they're caving to the medium that put them out of business. it's a bit extreme, but just the yeah, I hope you go with my illustration there. That it is like you're feeding the very monster that is like siphoning patrons away from the doors of cinemas, and it's just like there's just so much irony to be found in this move, and I'm glad it's not the 100th birthday. That'd be and the prior year's ceremony, but it's just like, oh my gosh, we're starting year 101 with with a with a move over to YouTube.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a youthful business. I get it. And they're always after the younger people. And I guess that's just their way of
yeah.
chasing after them, Can't
I
beat them, join them. I don't know.
I suppose so. Well, we are getting close to the end of the hour, but there's another one or two things I'd like to touch on here real quickly, Debbie. If
Okay.
the Oscars are to endure as more than a televised event, or web-based event, as a true steward of film history, what do they need to reclaim first? Is it trust, artistic rigor, or just a clearer sense of purpose?
Well, a clearer sense of purpose would be nice.
Hmm.
And again, I really, truly believe they need to get back to the basics.
Hmm.
What happened to storytelling and character development?
Yeah.
Everything has its place, and to me, that has just been so very lost
Hmm.
in the shuffle. Really, really lost in the shuffle.
I think reclaiming that clearer sense of purpose, I think, would be a great place to start. I feel if you focus on that clearer sense of purpose, the trust and artistic rigor, they're going to come along for the ride. I think that
Right.
that's where you reshift your direction, reshift your focus, and those other things will hopefully fall in line with that. We've talked about so much today. We could go on for probably another few hours. But, Debbie, before we close out this hour, is there anything else that you want to mention that we haven't discussed?
Um, just that I think the movies have come a long way in the last 100 years.
Hmm.
And I think there's a great future in them
Hmm.
if the movie makers apply themselves.
Hmm. Yeah, that's what it is. It's applying themselves and focusing on. We're talking about the Academy Awards shifting their focus, but filmmakers, focus on your
Filmmakers.
story, focus on your characters, because great films will eventually rise to the top, even if they're not the one that takes home gold. How many movies, Debbie, do you find yourself talking about that did that? Maybe they were nominated, maybe not, definitely didn't take home gold, and yet those are the movies half a century later that you're still talking about. Because I know there's a bunch that I talk about that certainly didn't go home with gold. I mean, Alfred Hitchcock alone didn't even go home with gold, and so
No, he did not.
you've got movies that it's just like time is the real test, and so it's to say that those great films will rise to the top, as long as they're written by writers who care, directors who care about their vision and can work well with their team and focus on the story, not what some socio-political pundit or some influencer on social media is saying somewhere. Focus on your story, and
Yes.
we can celebrate that. Well, thank you so much, Debbie, for joining us today on Real Talk. In case listeners want to follow you, read your books and articles, how can they best find or connect with you?
We have a website. It's called aplaceintime.press. And all of our books are out there. I have a writing partner, and I have co written 3 books with her, Cheryl Dubois. And I had a recent book come out, part one of a series. It's called Imperfect Paradise, part one of the Chandler Connection. And I managed to put some Hollywood history in that book as well. It takes place in 1975 Hollywood. I also have a Facebook page, Hollywood Tales from Tinseltown. So if you want to look me up there, you can.
Excellent. Thank you so very much. And before we go, I'd be remiss not to ask you what your favorite movie or movies are, regardless if they went home with gold or not. Do you have a favorite movie, Debbie?
I do. I have a very favorite film of all time. It's It Happened One Night with Clark Gable and Claudette
Oh,
Colbert. I love it.
oh, what a great film. Great,
It
great
was a
film.
great, great film, yes. And it holds up. It's still hilarious today.
Oh, most certainly still does. It's one I have seen, and I concur with you. Well, listeners, if you missed any of today's episode or to listen to past episodes of Real Talk or other shows on WKGC, we are on a podcatcher near you. Just search for WKGC Public Media on your podcast service of choice. Stay tuned for Jazz in a Minor Key with Walter Hale coming up next. Thanks to all of you for listening. I hope you'll tune in again next week, same time, same place for more Real Talk on 90.7 WKGC.